everyone, welcome to my history class. And today we are going to talk about the French Revolution, and that's a chapter for class ninth, part 1. And I've divided my chapter into different sections so that it will be easy for you to remember the concept. So let's move ahead. So, what all are we going to do in part 1? We are going to define the term revolution. We are also going to see the events that led to the coming up of the French Revolution. We'll also see the rule of Louis XVI, discuss on the division of the French society, about system of taxation, and lastly the consequences, that is the struggle for survival. So let's move ahead. Before moving, we should be knowing the meaning of the term revolution. It's a sudden, a radical, or the complete change. But if I want to talk in terms of the French Revolution, then it is a fundamental change in the political organization, especially the overthrow or renunciation of one government or ruler and the substitution of another by the governed. But what happened on 14 July 1789? This Louis XVI, the king, he ordered his troops to move into the city. And not only this, there were rumors that had spread in Paris that the king's army would open fire upon the citizens on the orders of the king. But remember one thing, everyone, that it was just an order for the army by the king to move in the city and not for killing or attacking the people. And the resentment of despotic rule was mounting. And as a consequence, in order to counter the attack of the army and defend themselves, people decided to form a militia. Now, what is a militia? Where the civilians, they are being trained as soldiers, but remember they are not part of the regular army. Now, if they want to defend themselves from the attack of the army, they need arms and ammunition. So, hence, they were not having anything. So, I can say they were armless. So, what to do? So, in search of those arms and ammunition, they started entering into the government buildings. If you can see on your screen, this is a picture which is showing that the fortress prison that was Bastille was the first to be attacked by a large group of people in search of ammunitions. And a fight ensued between the people and the army that resulted in what? In killing the commander of Bastille, and also the people released all the prisoners. But still, there's one question, and that question is that why Bastille was stormed? Because people associated it with the tyrannical and despotic power of the king. Not only this, the consequence of the attack of the people on this fortress was that it was destroyed and demolished. And interestingly, its stone pieces were even bought by some people who wanted to keep them as souvenir of its devastation. Now, what is the meaning of souvenir? It's a things or any object that are a reminder of the past event. And after this, we can also see that even some of the artists started making the paintings to commemorate the demolition of Bastille and to show the rise of people's power. Now let's move into the rule of Louis XVI. Now Louis XVI ruled in France from 1774 to 1792, and he was the last monarch of France. He belonged to the Bourbon family, and at the age of 20, he married an Austrian princess, Marie Antoinette. And not only this, he was under enormous debt. Now, what's the reason for that? Let's find out. So, when King Louis XVI ascended the throne, he found the treasury was empty. What is the reason for that? 7 years of war that took place, between 1756 and 1763 with Prussia, Britain, and German allies, it exhausted their financial resources. And a large amount of money was even required to maintain a colossal palace of Versailles. Then, debt and financial crisis deepened, and the reason is that from 1776, Louis XVI supported the North American colonies in their struggle for independence from whom? From Great Britain. Now, France was under the debt of 2 billion livres, and due to the war, and the debt increased by more than a billion livres. Now, what is a livre? It is a unit, or it was a unit of currency in France that got discontinued in 1794. The state was taking credits from these lenders, and now these lenders they started charging 10% interest on those loans. And all these factors that we have talked about, it led to a larger percentage of its budget being paid as the interest payment by the French government. Now, finances were also required for regular expenses. Now, what are these regular expenses? Such as cost of maintaining army, cost of maintaining the court, and cost of maintaining the running government offices or universities. And so the empty treasury, it forced the state to increase the taxes. But this measure was also not sufficient, or this measure was also not enough. Now let's talk about social division of the French society. Now, in the feudal system in France, in the Middle Ages between 9th to 15th century, the society was divided into estates. Now, before moving on to what estates are and three types, let me just tell you the definition of feudal system. What is a feudal system? Now, it is a system in which a piece of land was given to a peasant or worker in exchange of services and military services during the war. And the king was part of no estate but of monarchy. And the French society was divided into three estates until the French Revolution. And the three estates were three categories of the social hierarchy. And remember that only the members of the third estate paid the taxes. So let's see this with the help of a diagram. Now, the first estate is the clergy, the second estate is the nobility, and the third estate is the big businessmen, but it also included the artisans, the peasants, small peasants, landless labor, servants. They all were coming under the third estate. But now just look a little more into the society and know about who all are they. Now, first estate is the clergy. They are the ones who enjoyed certain privileges by birth. Second estate is nobility. They too enjoyed certain privileges by birth, but they had additional one, that is a feudal privilege. And the third estate, they paid all the taxes. Majority of population consisted of peasants, and the peasants formed only 90% of population. So most of the peasants were landless, though some did own land. And nobles, the church, the wealthy people of the third estate, owned 60% of the land. And surprisingly, the first and the second estate, they had certain privileges, as I've told you earlier, by birth. But one more thing, they were exempted from paying any kind of tax to the state. So no tax was being paid by the first and the second. All the taxes was being paid by the third. And nobles also had the feudal privileges, that is, by which they could take the taxes from the peasants. Now, peasants also have to work for the Lord. So, what kind of work it include? It include the working in the housing fields during the war, to serve in the army, and to render services in constructing the roads. Now we're talking about these taxes. So let's come with the system of taxation. The members of the first estate, that's the church, took its share of taxes from the peasants, and these taxes were called as tithes. And the tithe is a tax that is levied by the church on the peasants, and they have to pay 1/10 of the total agricultural produce. State took taxes from all the members of the third estate. Now, we had two kinds of taxes. One was a direct, that's called a tally. It's a tax that was being paid directly to the states. And second one is the indirect taxes that had to be, which were paid on goods of daily consumption, like if I take example of salt and tobacco, right? So indirect taxes, these are the taxes that were paid on the goods of daily consumption. Now, there were certain events that led to the discontentment in the people as well. First, the population of France was increasing tremendously from 23 million to 28 million. So, because of this, the demand for food increased, and not only this, the food production was limited, and so it could not meet the demand. And the bread, which was also a staple food, its prices also increased. This is one part. The second is that most owners of the workshop, they fixed the wages of the workers, and that's why the wages could not keep pace with the rise in the prices of items of basic needs. And as a result, the result was that it widened the gap between the rich and the poor. Now let's look at the last one, which is the consequences, that there was still a struggle for survival. What was that? That at times of drought or hail, it led to the poor harvest that made the situation worse. And this led to subsistence crisis. Now, what is the subsistence crisis? It is when the basic means of livelihood are threatened. And these kinds of crises often occurred in France during the old regime. Now, what is an old regime? It's ancient regime which is usually used to describe the political and social system and society in France until the French Revolution of 1789. These are some of the references for you. And today we have done all this in part one, and in the next section we are going to talk about some of the political philosophers, their ideas, and the outbreak of the revolution, and most importantly, the coming of the middle classes. Thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you.